Hey, I'm Matt Whitman, and this is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Idaho edition. I'm speaking at a camp this week on the west side of Yellowstone National Park. So at some point, it wouldn't be entirely out of the question for a grizzly bear to just wander out of the woods and maul me. But I think in the Bible, grizzly bears only maul people for making fun of the bald. They don't maul the bald. You can look that up. My point is this: Bon Jovi's Living on a Prayer is confusing. It sounds like the lyrics for that should be, doesn't make a difference if we're naked or not. You got each other and that's a lot for love. It sounds like naked. It completely sounds like naked. The line is not, doesn't make a difference if we're naked or not. It entirely does make a difference if we're naked or not. It doesn't make a difference if we make it or not. And that is the tip of the iceberg. I've got like 50 more lyrics I was pretty sure I had correct that I don't have correct at all. The obvious point of all of this very coherent intro is this: I know what it feels like to be really sure I was right about something and then one day have it pointed out to me that I was completely wrong about that thing. And the passage we're looking at today is the story of a guy who was absolutely sure he was on the right side of a thing and then figured out through pretty brutal circumstances that he was absolutely on the wrong side of that thing. We're going to be in Acts chapter 9 verses, looks like 10 through 19. If you want to take a minute and read it, that would be awesome. If not, I'll be going through the whole thing and you'll pick it up that way. Here's the rapid fire version of what we've been talking about. In the last episode, we looked at a guy named Saul who was on his way up to Damascus to round up Christians and throw them in jail, maybe worse. On his way there, he gets knocked to the ground by a bolt of light and he hears a voice from heaven who identifies himself as Jesus and gets instructed that the persecuting days are over and that the new plan is going to involve him going and waiting in Damascus. And that's where we pick it up in verse 10. In Damascus, there was a disciple named Ananias. The Lord called to him in a vision, "Ananias." "Yes, Lord," he answered. First of all, this again raises the question, why do miraculous things seem to be happening all the time in the Bible and not quite so much sense? I'd love to tear into it, but I've figured out that bonus videos give me a chance to talk about things that don't fit that well into 10-minute Bible hour videos. So you're going to get a bonus video on that one too. But the other thing about this is the Ananias character. We haven't met him before. We don't know a lot about him. But I think there's a couple things that we can kind of deduce about who he must be. He's a Christian from one of two places. Either he's been around it for a while and is a Jerusalem Christian who got out of Dodge after Stephen's execution, which means he's recently relocated to Damascus to get away from, hey, what do you know, Saul, and then he hears in this vision that he's going to run into a guy named Saul. Bummer. The other possibility is that he's a brand new Christian who's a native Damasculator. Not sure on exactly the name for what that would be, but the point is, from Damascus, modern day Syria, the gospel is relatively recent there, so in this case, you're talking about kind of a rookie of the faith getting this instruction from God. It had to be kind of a freaky moment for him. But something else that I think is interesting here is how specific the prophecy is. This is, again, not some vague feeling or impression that he kind of got and felt like he should go and do some stuff and maybe guessed wrong the first 12 times, but then the 13th time guessed right and was like, it was from God, it's a miracle, this is amazing. I hear stuff like that in this day and age, but in the Bible, it's usually pretty specific. Pretty much God has a thing for you to do. It's going to be spelled out just like this. So we see these specifics. The guy's house he's supposed to go to, his name's Judas. He lives on Straight Street. The guy you're looking for is a guy named Saul, who is specifically from the city of Tarsus. That's a lot of specifics. It's better than an address, really. But speaking of addresses, if you want to go there and see that place, you can still see this Roman street that runs right through the middle of Old Town Damascus. It's called Straight Street. And there's even a house that is kept up there that's regarded as the site of where all of this stuff happened. Verse 12, the second half of the prophecy, says, "In a vision he has seen a man named Ananias come and place his hands on him to restore his sight." So we've got three visions here, really. We've got Saul's vision on the road to Damascus that we looked at last episode. We have the vision to Ananias that we're hearing about right here. And then we have an undocumented vision that occurred after the fact with Saul, where he was made aware of Ananias and where he was supposed to go and what he was supposed to do, and heard the promise that he would get his sight back. So three visions, and what all of this means is that God is clearly orchestrating this stuff because he's got some ambition or design on these people's lives. "Lord," Ananias answered, "I've heard many reports about this man and all the harm he's done to your saints in Jerusalem. And he's come here with authority from the chief priest to arrest all who call on your name." He's got his facts straight. He knows this guy is trouble. So Ananias is thinking, well, I left Jerusalem to get away from that mess, and now this mess has come to me, and now God is ordering me further and deeper into that mess. That's a tough deal for him. Ananias is being cool about this, but I feel like implicit in his question is another deeper question, that being, do I get killed? You have got to go. Oh. Success. I just took a life on camera. But I think what Ananias wants to know is, am I going to get killed by this Saul guy? Is that what the plan is? When in verse 15, this takes a weird turn. But the Lord said to Ananias, go, this man is my chosen instrument to carry my name before the Gentiles and their kings and before the people of Israel. Verse 16, I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. Last episode, I talked about the idea that it seemed like what God was up to is that he was poaching the worst bad guy and moving him over to team good guy. And now we've got further confirmation that that's exactly what God is up to. Saul has all kinds of credibility and inroads that nobody else in this movement has. And God is going to take a guy who's perfectly prepped for the job and just move him into the right frame of mind. But to get there, he's got to go through that troubling process I was talking about at the beginning of the episode, which is realizing that everything you thought you knew was wrong, that you were on the wrong side of an issue you were sure you had right. And this time of blindness might not be the worst thing for a guy who has to completely reorient his understanding of religion, faith, God, the world, his role in it, and come to grips that he just killed someone who was right all along. And that tidbit at the end of verse 16 was no joke. That stuff about how he's going to show Saul how much he has to suffer, because it was a lot. This guy is going to get stoned and dragged to the edge of a city and left for dead. He is going to end up in situations where he's run out of town and has his life threatened. He's going to get shipwrecked and nearly die in that process. He's going to be put on trial, arrested multiple times, and eventually face trial before Caesar. We don't get to it in the Bible, but history tells us that the Emperor Nero eventually took his head over this whole Jesus thing. Saul was at ease with that. He said so in a letter that he wrote to one of these churches that he helped found in the city of Philippi. He said to them that for him to live is Christ and to die is gain. He got the drill. There were no surprises. He knew exactly what he was signing up for, even though it was a pretty tough deal. Verse 17 gets even more interesting. Notice there is no break between the conversation between Ananias and God and what he goes and does next. It says this, Then Ananias went to the house and entered it. Placing his hands on Saul, he said, Brother Saul, the Lord Jesus, who appeared to you on the road as you were coming here, has sent me so that you will see again and be filled with the Holy Spirit. What this says to me is Ananias, who seems like a completely sane human being like you or me, was utterly convinced that he had heard stuff from God that required him to go to this house and just identify himself as a follower of Jesus to someone whose job it is to kill people who are followers of Jesus. In verse 18, it says, Immediately something like scales fell from Saul's eyes, and he could see again. He got up and was baptized. In verse 19, after taking some food, he regained his strength. So like all the healings we've seen so far, this is immediate. It's not just someone who started to feel a little bit better or whose eyesight got a little better near the Sarlacc pit and suddenly was pretty sure that they were recovering. It was instant. There were scales that fell off his eyes. In other words, tangible proof for the people in the room that he just went from being blind to being able to see. And now his conversion, if you will, is complete. He's no longer going to be the instrument of destruction of the gospel. He's now going to be God's chosen instrument for taking the message about his kingdom out to a much larger audience. On the surface, Saul's conversion seems pretty straightforward. He used to think this, now he thinks this, and now he's moving in this new direction. Sounds like the way most people convert from one system of belief to another system of belief. But his story served an important historical purpose that needs to be noted here in order for what we see next to make any sense. Everybody thought this guy was the bad guy of all bad guys, and in order for God to really make his point, the story needed to happen in front of witnesses. It needed to be public. It needed to be miraculous, both for the sake of the critics and the skeptics, and for the sake of the Christians who were rightfully going to be very wary of him. We're going to see that the Jerusalem Christians have to come up and check this out and investigate it, because what if it's a trick or some kind of ploy to draw everybody out of hiding so they can just be more easily rounded up and killed? No, the whole thing is done publicly so that both sides get a clear picture of what God is up to. Last thing, for my friends here who've been around Christianity a lot, and for my friends here who are viewing this from the outside, there's language that you might hear from time to time where people will say that they have a calling. It is not mine to judge who has a, quote, calling or not calling. In fact, I don't even really totally know what that means. I would not say that I have any such thing from God. I would say I'm interested in the Bible and I like talking about it with my friends, and so I do that on my own time, and sometimes I set up a camera and I do that on the internet. But there are some who would say, no, specifically, I am uniquely called by God to this task. Could they be right? Sure, they could be right. Could some people be full of hot air? Probably that is the case as well. But what I'm pretty sure of is this, is whether somebody can point to something specifically where they say, God miraculously told me to do this or not. There's just stuff that's redemptive and good that you can do with your life. And there's stuff that's not redemptive and not cool and not loving that you can do with your life. And I'm pretty sure that whether somebody has ever specifically miraculously heard from God or not, whether someone specifically feels a calling or not, that everybody, people who believe this and people who don't, are called toward those basic things like love your neighbor as yourself and even love your maker with all you got. These seem to be the basic, biggest, most principled commands of God. And I'm pretty sure they're meant to apply to all of us, even though we're all somewhere in process on those things. Saul was very specifically and uniquely called for a very specific task, lined out verbatim by God. You and I, it might not be the case, but it seems like our Maker has put a general call on all of humanity to some certain obvious things that apply to everybody, whether we've ever been around the miraculous or not. Okay, whether that calling language is something that resonates with you, whether it's not, whether all of this seems like it's completely far-fetched and ridiculous, I would say grace and peace to all of you. The goal of a show like this is not to solve all of the questions and be the internet genius that knows everything about the Bible. I will never be that guy. I don't know enough. I'll never know enough. But what I can do is make the conversation move forward. Where you land on these things is between you and yourself or you and God, however you want to come at that. I'm just honored to get to be a part of the conversation. I thank you very much for watching this and the other shows as well. If you like the show and appreciate what I'm doing, I'd be very grateful if you'd subscribe if you haven't already. My goal is to earn that. I'm not looking for a handout. I want this to be something that provides value to you and that you enjoy and look forward to. If that's the case, I want to push my luck a little bit and ask if you would pass it along to somebody who you think might enjoy it as well. Helps me out a lot to have my audience grow, gives me more opportunities to talk about these things and more opportunities to make more videos like this one. Either way, I'm going to keep it coming because I'm having a blast. Thank you so much for being a part of the 10-Minute Bible Hour. I'm Matt Whitman, and we'll see you next time around.